the ALTA G1M from Silverstone. Every time I look at this case, the humping robot from Robot Chicken pops into my head because this case looks so damn good. But is it any good? Let's find out. What's up everyone, Eric here and welcome to Hardware for Gamers. For those of you who are new to the channel, I review and test PC cases, CPU coolers, and PC case fans. So if you end up liking this video, can you please hit that like button and hit the subscribe button? It does help out a lot. As always, I will have timestamps down in the description so you can jump to whatever interests you. But as always, I recommend you watch the whole review. Before I get too far into this overview, just to have full disclosure, Silverstone did send me over this case to review, but as always, all the opinions expressed in this video are mine. Okay, Silverstone offers two color options for this case, black or white. Now the MSRP of the black is 170 USD and the MSRP of the white is 180 USD. But pricing at time of filming is all over the place. I found the black version for as low as 155 US dollars and I found the white version for as high as 330 US dollars. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure what's going on here, but these prices are pretty ridiculous. Okay, getting into this overview. The dimensions of the G1M are 50.3 centimeters high by 20 centimeters wide by 30.8 centimeters deep. So this case does have an unusual footprint. Silverstone does provide a small bag that has the screws and fittings in it. There are also some zip ties in there. Now there is no manual in the box, but there is a QR code on the box to download the e-manual. Taking a look at the front of the case, the front I/O is located on the bottom left corner and consists of a combo port for the front audio out and mic. There are two USB 3.0 Type A ports and one USB Type C port, as well as a restart and power button. To remove the front panel, you will first need to remove the top panel. The top panel is held in by magnets, so all you have to do is just lift it up. The top panel is steel with a plastic surround and has an interesting geometric pattern on it. And there is a built-in dust filter on the top panel. Removing the top panel reveals the motherboard I/O location, 4 expansion slots, which do all have reusable covers, and some ventilation holes in the chassis. To remove the front panel, simply just pull the top of the panel away from the chassis. The front I/O is attached to the chassis, so you don't have to worry about damaging any of the cables when removing the front panel. Taking a closer look at the front panel, it has a different pattern on it than the other panels. This pattern has a much higher perforation percentage than the top and side panels. And again, much like the top panel, it is a steel insert with a plastic surround. The panel is held in by 6 metal nubs. And again, like the top panel, it has a built-in dust filter. Moving to the back of the case, there is another panel. This panel is steel with the same geometric pattern as the top panel. This panel is fastened to the chassis with a captive thumb screw. To remove this panel, undo the thumb screw on the top of the case, slide the panel up, then tilt the panel back and lift it away. This back panel does also have a dust filter on the inside of the panel. Now this filter can be removed, but I highly recommend you don't because it is a massive pain to get back in. By removing this panel reveals a grommeted pass-through for the motherboard I/O. There are two 120mm fan or two storage drive mounts on the back side of the case. You can see the SFX power supply location and a plug at the bottom. This plug is a pass-through for the power supply. The SFX power supply location gives 168mm for the power supply and cables, so this case can support an SFX and an SFX-L power supply. Moving to the right side panel, it is again steel with the same geometric pattern as the back and top panels. Removing the right panel is the same as the back panel. Undo the thumb screw at the top of the case, slide the panel up, then tilt it back and lift it away. This panel has a large magnetic dust filter on the inside of the panel, so it can be easily removed. Looking back at the case, there is a bracket. This bracket holds up to 2 storage drives or up to 3 120mm fans. There is also support for up to a 360mm radiator. This bracket can be removed by removing the 2 screws along the top. Behind the bracket, we see the motherboard tray. This motherboard tray is rotated 90 degrees relative to the typical case. So this case has a different alignment to it than the typical case. There are two good sized cutouts to the right of the motherboard. These cutouts are for the EPS and fan connectors, but most of the cables will be running through the large covered cutout at the bottom of the case. You can also see the pass-through AC cable for the SFX power supply. Okay, the ALTA G1M supports mini ITX and micro ATX motherboards. The maximum GPU length is 355 millimeters, with a max GPU width of 165 millimeters. Finally, the max CPU cooler height is 159 millimeters, but that will be cut down if you mount anything to the bracket. Turning the case around to the left side, the left panel is steel and there are no ventilation holes. To remove this panel is the same as the other panels. Undo the thumb screw at the top, slide the panel up, then tilt the panel back and lift it away. Looking back at the case, we see the backside of the motherboard tray, which has a few cable tie-offs on it. There are also two sets of cable management Velcro straps on the large covered cutout. Finally, looking at the bottom of the case, this chassis sits on a plastic stand. This stand gives 32 millimeters of ventilation for the only pre-installed fan. This fan is set up as an intake fan, and there is a dedicated removable dust filter for it. To remove the filter, simply just pinch the filter down and then slide the filter out. The bottom of the case has rubber pads on it to help stop the case from sliding around. Okay, to wrap up this overview, I'll go over the cooling options. As I just said, this case has only one pre-installed fan. It is a 180 millimeter fan, and it is located at the bottom of the case, and it is again an intake. Now it is possible to add 5 additional 120 millimeter fans. So that's 3 fans on the removable bracket, which gets fastened on the right side of the case, and 2 fans along the rear of the chassis. Now all of these fan locations do double as a hard drive or SSD mount, so you do have to choose. Do you want to mount a fan, or do you want to mount a storage drive? Now if you prefer to have 140 millimeter fans, you're out of luck here because this case doesn't support 140 millimeter fans. Now for radiator support, there is support for up to one 360 millimeter radiator on the bracket. Now I do have my doubts that all 360 millimeter radiators can fit on this bracket because there is 401 millimeters between the top of the fan and the top or the bottom of the chassis there. So most 360 millimeter radiators will squeeze in there, but I'm not sure if all of them will. So before you buy a 360 millimeter radiator for this case, you just might want to check the actual dimensions of the radiator. And that's it for the overview of the ALTA G1M. Now, if you're liking this video, can you please hit that like button? And if you really like this video, can you hit that subscribe button? Because it does help out the channel a lot. And if you really want to help out the channel, I also have Amazon Associates links. So if you click on one of the links in the description and then add an item or items to your cart and order them, the channel will get a small kickback at no extra cost to you. So with that out of the way, on to my build notes. Starting with cable management, I had no problems fitting the SFX-L modular power supply in, which was nice. Now my OCD didn't like that there wasn't a tie-off on the top left corner for the EPS cable. There are tie-offs on the other corners, just not that corner. And I know it's not really affecting anything, but I would really like to tie it down. Now, based off how the cable management works in this case, it seems to make a lot more sense to use the rear fan / drive mounts as the storage drive mounts, because getting power to that side bracket will be very odd. Now, I'm not really sure if this should be in build notes, but I couldn't get the cables that I normally use to reach the top of the case to plug in. So I guess just something to think about if you are looking to replace your existing case with this case. You might end up having to re-cable manage your desk because your cables are going to have to go a fair bit further, like another 18 inches or so. And finally, for anyone who wants to know, the included 180 millimeter fan is a CC180 32H12D. It does have a 4-pin PWM connector. Its max RPM is around 1200-ish, and its minimum RPM was around 200-ish. And I guess that's all my build notes. I didn't really have any issues building in the case. Everything went pretty nice and smooth. So I guess that means on to the temperature testing. Now, if you do have any questions on how I test the cases, please watch my SFX / ITX case testing methodology video. I'll have it in a card above, and I'll also have it linked down in the description. And just to let you know, members of the HFG Discord server can access all the charts from all my reviews. So that's all the case testing, all the CPU coolers, and all the case fans. And it is completely free to join. All you have to do is click the link down in the description. I tested 2 extra fan configurations on top of the stock at full speed and the 35 dBA stock fan. That being 3 intake fans on the side bracket with then the stock fan. This will have the system in a positive pressure. Then I flipped the 3 fans around to be exhaust and still have this stock fan. And this will have the system in a negative pressure. And I feel these tests should give a pretty good idea on how this case will behave. Taking a look at the CPU workload temperatures, starting at the bottom of the chart, having the stock fan and the 3 exhaust fans had the average CPU temperature at 65.7 C. Just the stock fan at 35 dBA had the average CPU temperature at 65 C. Then just the stock fan running at full speed had the average CPU temperature at 62 C. So a 3 Celsius difference between the full speed test and the 35 dBA test. But there's also a 10 dBA difference between those 2 tests. So yeah. Then when I removed the front and top panels and had the stock fan running at full speed, the average CPU temperature only went down to 61.6 C. Meaning the dust filters are not restricting airflow to the CPU. Then with the 3 side fans as intakes and the stock fan, the average CPU temperature was 59.2 C. So yeah, blasting the CPU with a bunch of fresh air drops the CPU temperature. Surprise, surprise. Moving on to the gaming temperatures. With the 3 side fans as intakes and the stock fan, the average CPU temperature was 33.7 and the average GPU temperature was 75.5. So yeah, the lowest CPU temperature, but the highest GPU temperature. The stock fan at 35 dBA had the average CPU temperature at 39.7 C and the average GPU temperature at 74.3 C. The stock fan running at full speed had the average CPU temperature at 37.4 C and the average GPU temperature at 72.8 C. Then having the stock fan and the 3 side fans as exhausts had the average CPU temperature at 37.7 C and the average GPU temperature at 71.4 C. Then when I removed the top and front panels and had the stock fan running at full speed, the average CPU temperature was at 35.8 C and the average GPU temperature was at 71.1 C. Meaning the top and front panels are not restricting airflow to the CPU or GPU in any meaningful way. Now I would normally go over the other cases I've tested with this case, but since I haven't tested any other cases, I can't compare it to anything, so I'm just going to cut it off here and go right on to what I think. So what do I think of the ALTA G1M from Silverstone? I like it. I really do like it. Now, I think the reason why I like it so much is because it is so different from other cases. It's something new and it's something different, which is always refreshing. Now, for those of you who haven't been keeping count, this is the 24th case that I've actually tested or at least looked at. And the only other case that I can think of that is somewhat different, like this is different, is the Core V21. Which definitely doesn't look anywhere near as good as this, and the build quality isn't quite up to this standard either, or to this level anyways. But to be fair to the Core V21, the G1M is twice the price, so yes, you are paying for it. Now, none of this would really matter if the G1M's temperatures were shit. Now, thankfully they're not. I wouldn't say they're great, but they're certainly not bad. And again, after testing this case and everything, like the only real issue I have with this case is availability. And because the availability sucks, the pricing is just way the hell out there because $300 USD is a joke. Just don't. Please just don't buy it at that price. You're just helping out scalpers. It's just don't, please. I'm just going in a circle here, but yeah, don't. In the not so distant future, I would hope or at least like the price to get to around 120 to 150 USD. At that price, I think it is a pretty good deal. Now, I would also recommend going with a good AIO in the exhaust orientation. Having the fans in the exhaust orientation will allow the GPU to pull in more fresh air, while having the AIO will help the CPU deal with the hot air from the GPU. And for those of you who are thinking, oh, the dust, the negative pressure, you're going to have dust. This thing is filtered out to the max. You're really not gonna have much issues with the ways of dust. And again, this thing is filtered out. All the panels come off nice and easy. So you can just take them off, go clean them, and then reattach them. It'd probably take you 5-10 minutes at most. So I really do think going with a negative pressure setup is the best thing for this case. And again, me recommending going with a good AIO when you're spending $150 on the case, I don't think is that much of a stretch, because most people would be looking at AIOs anyways, typically in situations where it is way more than the case they're buying. A lot of people buy a $60 case and then go buy a $120 AIO, which I don't understand. But like the pairing of a good AIO and this case makes sense to me. Now I just wanted to add, I did go back and actually do a spot check of the stock fan with the 3 exhaust fans. Noise equalized to 35 dBA. The average CPU temperature was 38-ish and the average GPU temperature was 72-ish. So you're getting pretty much the same temperatures as running the stock fan at full speed, but 10 dBA quieter. So yeah, I definitely feel comfortable recommending the ALTA G1M. Now that, of course, that is assuming you can get it for a reasonable price. I'm assuming it has something to do with availability, because availability is really scarce on this thing. So scalpers are trying to like rip them off and feed them to you. But yeah, if you can get it for a reasonable price, this is a pretty nice case, and it looks, at least I think it looks really nice. And that's all I have for this one. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're still watching, maybe hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you get notified whenever I drop a new video. If you do have any questions, please leave them in the comments, or you can join the HFG Discord server. It is completely free to join. There is a link down in the description. And as always, thank you for watching, and see you next time.